a lot of our sin comes from the wounds that we've accumulated. And so we act out in sin as a way of coping with these wounds. Welcome to Outside of Eden, the podcast. I am Brianna, your host. Thank you so much for tuning into the episode. If you are new here, be sure to subscribe to the channel so that you can be updated when I post new content. Okay. I know last week I said that we were going to get more into breakthrough, but the Lord was kind of leading me a different way. We are going to get into the premise of healing. You have the Israelites who have just been delivered from the hands of Pharaoh, delivered from Egypt. Egypt being a place where they experienced slavery, they experienced hardship, they experienced abuse. And so they are entering into their healing process without even knowing, without a warning, that that is exactly what they're about to enter into. And so before they could begin the healing process, the introductory to their healing process was the change of their environment. And so with us, in order for us to experience healing, to be introduced to healing, and for healing to kind of be cultivated, it's important that we have a safe place to heal. And so it was important that the Israelites were pulled out of the place that was causing them turmoil, that was burdensome for them, that was weighing down on them, and where they experienced trauma and abuse. It was important for them to be pulled out of that environment. And so you see in Exodus, this is shortly after the Lord has parted the Red Sea. And you see it says Exodus 15:22. Then Moses made Israel set out from the Red Sea, and they went into the wilderness of Shur. So they are no longer in Egypt. They're in the wilderness. They have changed environments, which is going to allow them to have a place where they are able to heal in conditions that are safe because they will be with God. Throughout Exodus, you see the presence of the Lord in a pillar of cloud by day and a fire by night. You see instances where his angel is being leading the Israelites. You see instances where the angel is behind the Israelites. It was important for them not only to change their environment, but in order for the healing process to begin, they had to be with God, in the presence of God. And so then you see that another part of the introduction to their healing came with getting to know the Father, being introduced to the Father. Not that they didn't know the Lord, but it was that this introduction is going to allow them to have a deeper relationship with God, getting to know God for who he is and not what they've known in the past, or not what they've heard, or not what they've believed previously, but God is introducing the ways and the laws and the way in which they shall know and address their Father. And so you see in Exodus 15:26, it says, there the Lord made for them a statute and a rule, and there he tested them, saying, if you will diligently listen to the voice of the Lord your God, and do that which is right in his eyes, and give ear to his commandments, and keep all his statutes, I will put none of the diseases on you that I put on the Egyptians, for I am the Lord, your healer. His place is Lord, as in he is in control of things like this, sickness and disease and all of these things, and healing and laws and statutes. And so he's letting them know that I am the Lord. If you listen to me, if you obey me, I can heal you. So in order for them to be introduced to the healing process, they had to know who the Lord God was, their healer. And they also had to know that it was potent. It was important for them to obey his laws and his statutes so that he can be Lord over them. Anytime we step outside of the commandments and we are living in sin, and I am learning as I'm going through my journey of healing as well, that a lot of our sin comes from the wounds that we've accumulated. And so we act out in sin as a way of coping with these wounds, And so sometimes, people who are actively living in sexual immorality, they actually are actively having sex before marriage because this helps them cope with the pain of their past, with the pain of the trauma and the abuse that they experience prior to fully knowing and getting to know the Lord their God. So the Lord is basically saying, in order for me to be Lord over your life, you have to obey my commandments. That way you can hear my voice. And so this was a basis for their healing. They had to obey and listen to God if they wanted to experience a transition, a breakthrough, and a healing from their past. So another thing that really stood out to me in the premise of the healing process was that the Israelites were forgetful of the goodness of God. They reminisced a lot on the past. And so if you go into Exodus 16:2, it says, "And the whole congregation of the people of Israel grumbled against Moses and Aaron in the wilderness. And the people of Israel said to them, 'Would that we had died by the hand of the Lord in the land of Egypt, when we sat by the meat pots and ate bread to the full, for you have brought us out into this wilderness to kill this whole assembly with hunger.'" And so what I realize is that when we're at the premise of healing, it is very easy for us to forget the goodness of God. They had just experienced the parting of the Red Sea. They had just experienced being delivered out of Egypt, but they cried out to God for this very thing. And it took plagues and things for them to be delivered fully out of Egypt. And so God delivering them from Egypt was God delivering them from slavery, delivering them from trauma, delivering them from bondage and oppression. So anytime we are basically experiencing abuse or trauma or broken promises, broken relationships, we are literally in a survival environment. Our environment is not necessarily thriving. It's more so we are trying to survive the oppression or the bondage or the trauma or abuse that we're experiencing. And so for them to reminisce on the past, well, we remember eating meat pots and we ate bread to the full. They remember the small good of the past and have forgotten fully the goodness of God, of that he had delivered them from this. When we're at the premise of healing, it's easy for us to focus on the negatives of life. And so when we're in need of healing, it's easy to point out the negatives in people. It's easy to point out the negatives in our circumstances. It's easy to point out the negatives in ourselves. That is very easy to do when we are on the premise, in the introductory stages, in the need of healing. And it's easy to forget the goodness of God because when you're in the wilderness, you're in a transition period. So there's so many things that could be going on in your circumstances that could blind you of the goodness of God. We could see through the Israelites how we know that we are in the premise or the need or the introductory period of healing. If it is easy for us to forget the goodness of God, if it is easy for us to reminisce on the past as if that the very thing that God pulled you out of was better, we are on the premise, we are in the need. God is introducing not only the need, but revealing that he is the healer and that he will heal. Another thing that I notice that can show up not only in the Israelites, but even with us, when it is being revealed to us that we need healing, or that we are on the premise or the intro of healing, is when there is misplaced anger. So you have in Exodus 16:6, it says, "So Moses and Aaron said to all the people of Israel, At evening you shall know that it was the Lord who brought you out of the land of Egypt. And in the morning you shall see the glory of the Lord, because he has heard your grumbling against the Lord. For what are we that you grumble against us? So, a lot of the times in the wilderness and throughout the process when Moses was leading them out of Egypt, they complained and they grumbled against Moses and they became angry with Moses. And you see Moses saying here, why are you grumbling against us? As if, we have control over this. No, we are not God. He's saying here, at evening you shall know that it was the Lord who brought you out of Egypt. In the morning you shall see the glory of the Lord, because he has heard your grumbling against the Lord. As in, he's letting them know that it is the Lord that you're grumbling against, by the way. And what are we that you grumble against us? You see how their anger was towards Moses, but the person that they were really angry with was God. God, we cried out to you when we were in Egypt and you pulled us out of that place. Well, why would you do that? Because in the wilderness, we were eating good in Egypt. And in the wilderness, it seems like there's no food, there's no clean water, there's no, you know what I mean? So they were taking their anger out on Moses, but in their hearts, they were really angry with God. And we have to think, are we misplacing our anger with strangers that we interact with that may irritate us, our children, our parents, our spouses, our friendships? Where are we misplacing the anger? And it may not even necessarily be that you're angry with God. You could be taking anger out on your children and your spouse, but you're really angry with your parents. You may be taking your anger out on your children, but you're really angry at your spouse. See that here, that this is a way that it can be revealed to us our need for healing, or that we're on the premise God is prepping us when he is opening our eyes to the fact that we are misplacing our anger. And he used Moses to make them aware of this, that, hey, you're grumbling against us, but it's really the Lord you're grumbling against. It's really the Lord that you're upset with. And if it really is the Lord that we are upset with, well, we need to talk to him and explain to him why we're upset, and explain to him what happened that made them feel like God was the reason. And so it's important that we're having those conversations with God so that we don't misplace our anger. God, why would you allow me to go through that? Why would you allow me to see that? Why would you allow that to happen to my sister or my brother? Why would you allow that to happen to my mother? What you literally have to go to God, seek him for the healing and seek him for the answers, because the person that we are associating the pain to or displacing the anger on, they can't heal us. They can't help us. And all we're doing by misplacing anger is hurting the person that we are being angry with or displaying anger towards. Now, lastly, the last point that I want to make, that is a part of the premise for healing or introductory to healing. After they have complained about the food that they ate in Egypt, and now how the wilderness is so different and that they're going to starve to death and die from hunger, you see God responding, and he says, then the Lord said to Moses, behold, I am about to rain bread from heaven for you, and the people shall go out and gather a day's portion every day, that I may test them, whether they will walk in my law or not. On the sixth day, when they prepare what they bring in, it will be twice as much as they gather daily. We know that on the seventh day is the day that God rested. So the sixth day is the day that is typically used to prepare for the Sabbath, to prepare for the day of rest. And you see here in Exodus 20:8, it says, remember the Sabbath day to keep it holy. 6 days you shall labor and do all your work. But the seventh day is a Sabbath to the Lord your God. On it you shall not do any work, you or your son or your daughter, or your male servant or your female servant, or your livestock, or the sojourner who is within your gates. For in 6 days the Lord made heaven and earth, the sea, and all that is in them, and rested on the seventh day. Therefore the Lord blessed the Sabbath day and made it holy. So you see here, he's basically saying, I am going to test them to see if they're going to obey my law. This was a law to keep the Sabbath day holy, to rest on the seventh day. And so he said on the sixth day, when they prepare what they bring in, it will be twice as much as they gather daily, because he wanted to make sure that they were preparing for the Sabbath the day before so that they can fully be in a rested state. Now you see in Exodus 16 and 23, he said to them, "This is what the Lord has commanded. Tomorrow is a day of solemn rest, a holy Sabbath to the Lord. Bake what you will bake and boil what you will boil, and all that is left over lay aside to be kept till the morning." So God is introducing them to rest. This is a premise for healing. If we are constantly on the go and busy and talking and this, and I have to do this, and this, and I have to be productive and da 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 da. If we're always in the works of things, we never have the time to actually rest and reset. It's important for the body because the healing process is not only spiritual, but it's physical as well. It's mental. Our brains need to rest from the overthinking and the reminiscing of the past and the worries and the cares of this world. Our brain needs to rest. Our spirit needs to rest. Bodies need to rest. This is why when you get sick, one of the top things that you are instructed and prescribed to do is rest. That is the same with the healing process. I think, too, even this entire process of the Israelites going through the wilderness, you see that their trust in God is being restored. Even through the tests are allowing them to build their trust in God. Because if you notice, every single time God says that he's going to test them. Well, if we read it again, 16:4, then the Lord said to Moses, "Behold, I am about to rain bread from heaven for you, and the people shall go out and gather a day's portion every day, that I may test them, whether they will walk in my law or not." What's so funny is that the Lord is showing him who he is as their father. I talked about introduction to the Father and who he is, getting to know the Lord your God as a part of your healing process, because he's basically saying, I'm going to rain bread. I'm going to provide. God is a provider. I'm going to show them that I can provide manna daily, and I will test them. I will show them who I am by providing for them. And in providing for them, I will test them and see if they will listen to me and obey my law. So God is testing them as a means to restore their trust in God. Do you trust me as your provider? Do you trust me to lead you and guide you? Do you trust me as your healer? So God, in this wilderness process, in the introductory process, you might see in the wilderness that you're being tested, that you're experiencing spiritual warfare, that you're experiencing situations where you have to cry out to God for help, where your resources are very, very short, but it's causing you to depend on God more. You are in a place where your dependency on God has increased, because it's important that in this process, you have to depend on God more than ever as you are entering into this healing process. Your dependency is going to help in your restoration of trust and building of your faith and building of your rapport with God, of your getting to know God. This is all a part of the process. So I think sometimes we're in the wilderness, we're experiencing these attacks and in these periods where we feel like we're lacking in certain areas, whether that's in our relationships or our finances, or we're lacking in support, or we're lacking in strength, or we're lacking in, and for them, literal provision of food and so in this situation where it requires an intense dependency on God, the Israelites, all they had was God. So their full dependency on God set the premise or the introduction for their healing to begin. I love you. Thank you so much for tuning into this episode. This was all. I love you. I will see you after Christmas. Next week, I am taking a week off, not only to sit with God, but to spend time with my family. I know. I just took some time off, but it's important because I want to make sure I'm also fully able to be present when I come to on the podcast. So I appreciate your patience. Thank you so much for tuning into this episode. I will see you in the next episode of Outside In.